Beloved chosen one, before one more word is spoken, I want you to breathe. Not the shallow breath you have been taking while you keep pushing forward. A real breath. A deep one. The kind that reaches all the way down into the tired places in your chest that you have not let anyone see. Because you are here right now, listening to these words, not by accident. You did not stumble onto this message by chance while scrolling through your day. Heaven arranged this moment for you, long before you pressed play, long before you even knew you needed to hear this. God was already preparing this exact word for this exact hour of your life. You are here by divine design and by divine purpose, and I need you to let that truth settle into you before we go any further. God's chosen one, I know something about you that you may not have said out loud to anyone. You have been carrying something heavy for a very long time. Maybe it is a family that depends on you and only you. Maybe it is a work, a ministry, a dream, a responsibility that you built with your own hands and that now feels like it will collapse the moment you loosen your grip. Maybe it is grief that you have folded up neat and tucked behind a smile so that everyone else could keep functioning, while you quietly fell apart on the inside. Whatever it is, you have been holding on so tightly for so long that your hands are shaking, and you do not even realize it anymore, because shaking has become your normal. I want you to hear this clearly, chosen one. Heaven has spoken. You have done enough. Read those words again if you need to. You have done enough, not because the work is finished, not because everything around you has been resolved, but because your strength has reached its limit, and God never asked you to carry what only He was meant to carry. Somewhere along the way, in your love for the people around you, in your desire to be faithful, in your fear of what might happen if you stopped, you picked up a weight that was never yours to carry alone. And today, in this very hour, heaven is reaching down to lift it from your shoulders. This is not a message about failure. Please do not receive it that way. This is a message about permission. Permission to rest. Permission to stop gripping so tightly. Permission to let the God who called you also carry you. Because there is a difference between abandoning your assignment and surrendering your grip on it. You are not being asked to walk away from your purpose. You are being asked to stop trying to fulfill it in your own strength, because your own strength was never going to be enough in the first place. It was never supposed to be enough. It was supposed to run out so that you would finally reach for the strength that never runs dry. Think for a moment about how you have been living. Waking up already tired, solving problems before your feet even hit the floor, holding conversations in your mind with people who have hurt you, rehearsing what you should have said, carrying arguments that never needed to happen, saying yes when your body was screaming no, smiling in rooms where your heart was breaking. Chosen one, that is not strength, even though it looks like strength from the outside. That is exhaustion wearing the mask of responsibility. And heaven sees straight through the mask, straight to the tired heart underneath it. And heaven is not impressed by your exhaustion. Heaven is moved by it, moved with compassion, the same way a father is moved when he sees his child trying to carry a load far too heavy for small arms. There is a story in the scriptures about a man who did something extraordinary, something so powerful that fire fell from the sky in front of an entire nation, and within a single day afterward, this same man collapsed in the wilderness and told God he wanted to die. We will walk through that story together in the parts ahead, because I believe with all of my heart that God placed this title in front of you today, because your story and that man's story are standing closer to each other than you realize. You have had your mountain of victory. You have had your fire falling from heaven moments, the answered prayer, the healing, the promotion, the reconciliation you fought so hard for. And yet here you are tired, in a way that victory was supposed to erase but somehow did not. That is not strange, chosen one. That is not a sign that something is wrong with your faith. It is often the exact moment, right after a breakthrough, when the body and the soul finally exhale everything they had been holding in during the battle. And what comes rushing out is not joy. It is exhaustion. The adrenaline of the fight fades, and what is left is the true cost of what it took to get here. God knows this. God has always known this. And that is exactly why heaven has spoken these words. Over you today, you have done enough. Now let me take over. I want to invite you into something during the next several minutes. Not a performance of faith, not another task to add to your list, but a slow unclenching. Imagine your hands right now, wherever you are, as if they have been closed into fists for months, maybe years. Imagine slowly opening those fingers, one at a time, and releasing whatever has been gripped so tightly inside them. The outcome you have been trying to control, the person you have been trying to fix, the timeline you have been trying to force, the fear you have been trying to manage all on your own. Let it fall gently into the hands of the one who has been reaching for it the entire time, waiting for you to finally let go. This is not weakness. Hear me clearly on this, because the enemy of your soul would love for you to believe that surrender is defeat. Surrender is not defeat. Surrender is wisdom. It takes far more courage to say, I cannot do this anymore in my own strength, than it does to keep white-knuckling your way through another day, pretending you are fine. The strongest people in Scripture were the ones who eventually came to the end of themselves and discovered that the end of themselves was actually the beginning of God's fullness working through them. So today, chosen one, we are going to walk together through a story of collapse and restoration, through the practical signs that tell you when you have reached your limit, through a testimony that will remind you that you are not alone in this feeling, through the deeper spiritual meaning behind everything you have walked through scripture that will anchor your soul, through an emotional climax that will remind you of how deeply you are loved, through a prayer that will carry the weight you cannot carry alone, and into a healing and awakening that will send you forward renewed, rather than renewed in appearance only. This is not going to be a quick fix. This is going to be a slow, deep breath of a message, because your soul does not need another hurried word. Your soul needs to be met exactly where it is tired, and held there until strength returns. Stay with me. Do not rush ahead. Let every part of this message land in the places that need it most, because heaven has already spoken over you. And now it is time for your heart to receive what has already been declared. You have done enough. Now let him take over. If something in what you just heard has already begun to move something in you, I want you to know that you are not alone in this room. Somewhere right now, another chosen one is hearing these same words and feeling the same stirring, and they need to know that this message exists. If you feel led, press like so, that this word travels further than it could on its own. Leave something in the comments so that every chosen one who finds their way here knows that others arrived before them and showed up just as they did. Share this with one person who has been quietly carrying more than anyone around them knows. And if this community is one you want to remain inside, subscribe so the next message finds you without you having to search for it. And if you feel moved to pass something forward to the person who has not yet found their way here, the donation link is in the pinned comment below. No obligation, just an open hand. Now let everything you just received settle for a moment, because what was briefly introduced is now ready to be given to you in full. To understand what heaven is speaking over you today, we have to go back to a mountain, a fire, and a man who was about to discover that even the greatest victories can leave a person more exhausted than they have ever been in their life. This is the story of the prophet Elijah, found in the book of 1 Kings, chapter 18 and chapter 19. And I want to walk through it slowly with you, because every single detail matters for what God wants to say to you today. Elijah lived during one of the darkest seasons in the history of Israel. The nation had turned away from the living God and given itself over to the worship of a false god named Baal, largely under the influence of a wicked queen named Jezebel, who had also been hunting down and killing the prophets of the true God. Elijah stood almost entirely alone as a voice for the Lord in a nation that had forgotten him. Imagine the weight of that. Imagine being the only one, or feeling like the only one, standing for truth while everyone around you has bowed to something false. That kind of loneliness carries its own exhaustion, long before any battle is ever fought. One day, Elijah issued a challenge to the 450 prophets of Baal on Mount Carmel in front of the entire nation. 2 altars would be built, one for Baal and one for the Lord, and whichever god answered by fire would be proven the true God. The prophets of Baal cried out for hours, cutting themselves, dancing, screaming to a God who never answered, while Elijah watched, unshaken. Then, when it was his turn, Elijah did something remarkable. He did not make it easy for God. He drenched the altar in water not once but 3 times, until the trench around it was completely full, removing any possibility of a natural explanation for what was about to happen. And then he simply prayed. 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 37 records his prayer, where he asked that the people would know that the Lord is God, and that he had turned their hearts back again. Fire fell from heaven, not a small flame, but a fire so complete that it consumed the sacrifice, the wood, the stones, the dust, and even licked up all the water in the trench. The people fell on their faces and cried out that the Lord, He is God. It was one of the greatest single displays of divine power in the entire Old Testament, and Elijah stood at the center of it, the man God used to bring an entire nation back to its knees in worship in a single afternoon. You would think that after a victory like that, Elijah would have felt invincible, unstoppable, filled with unshakable confidence for the rest of his life. And yet 1 Kings chapter 19 tells us something that surprises many readers the first time they encounter it. Jezebel, furious over the death of her false prophets, sent a message to Elijah, promising to kill him within a day. And Elijah, the same man who had just called down fire from heaven in front of an entire nation, became afraid. He ran for his life into the wilderness, and there, alone under a broom tree, he prayed that he might die, saying that he had had enough and asking God to take his life because he was no better than his ancestors before him. Ride that again, chosen one. The man who stood unafraid before 450 false prophets and an entire hostile nation collapsed in fear and despair after a single threatening message from one wicked queen. How does that happen? How does a man of that much faith and that much power fall so far so fast? The answer is something every single one of us needs to understand about ourselves. Elijah was not weak. Elijah was human. And humans, even the most faithful and powerful among us, have limits. The mountain of Carmel had cost him enormous spiritual, emotional, and physical energy. He had stood alone against overwhelming odds. He had carried the weight of an entire nation's spiritual condition on his shoulders. And once the adrenaline of that battle faded, once the crowd went home and the fire on the altar burned down to ash, what remained was a man who was utterly spent, running on empty, with nothing left in reserve to face even a single new threat. This is such an important truth, chosen one, because so many of us believe that after a great victory we should feel unstoppable, and when instead we feel depleted, afraid, or even hopeless, we assume something is wrong with our faith. But look at what God did next, because this is where the real heart of the story begins to unfold, and where the message for your life today truly comes alive. God did not rebuke Elijah for his exhaustion. God did not say to him, "After everything I just did through you, how dare you feel afraid?" God did not demand that Elijah get back up and keep performing. Instead, 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 5 tells us that as Elijah lay under the broom tree, an angel touched him and simply said, "Arise and eat." Elijah ate, drank, and went back to sleep. The angel came a second time and touched him again, saying, "Arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you." Notice what God provided first. Not a lecture, not another assignment, not a call to try harder. God provided sleep. God provided bread. God provided water. God met Elijah's exhausted body before he ever addressed Elijah's exhausted soul. This detail is one of the most tender pictures of God's character in all of Scripture, and it is the very heart of the message heaven wants you to receive today. Before God ever spoke another word to Elijah, he let him rest, he let him eat, he let him sleep again. He tended to the body first, because sometimes what looks like a crisis of faith is actually simply a body and a soul that have gone without rest for far too long. Strengthened by that food, Elijah walked 40 days and 40 nights to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God, and there he went into a cave and stayed the night. And it was there, in that quiet place, after the rest, after the nourishment, after the long walk of restoration, that God finally spoke to him directly, asking him a question that would change everything. We will return to that moment later in this message, because it holds one of the most important truths you need to hear today. But for now, I want you to sit with this picture. A man who did everything right, who obeyed God completely, who won an enormous victory, and who still collapsed afterward into fear, despair, and a desire to simply stop existing. And a God who responded not with disappointment, but with bread, water, sleep, and patience. This is the God who is speaking to you today, chosen one. Not a God who is frustrated with your tiredness. A God who is already preparing bread and water and rest for you, even now, even in this very moment, because he sees exactly how far you have carried this weight, and he knows the journey ahead is still too great for you to walk in your own strength alone. You have been carrying a signal inside you that the world never taught you to read. From the time you were small, you sensed things before they happened. You knew when something was wrong in a room before anyone said a word. You felt pulled toward purpose in moments when everyone around you seemed perfectly content to stay still. You thought it was just sensitivity. You thought it was just personality. But what if it was frequency? What if the thing that has always made you feel different from everyone else was not a flaw in your design, but a feature of it? And what if that feature has a name that science has only recently begun to understand? Researchers studying the most creatively gifted, the most intuitively advanced, the most cognitively powerful human beings on Earth have found something remarkable. These individuals, the ones who seem to operate on a different level entirely, share a specific pattern of brain activity. Their minds move in a frequency that most adults have almost completely lost. Scientists call it gamma. Spiritual discernment calls it the anointing, and both of them are pointing at the same thing. The chosen ones, the ones called to carry light into dark places, have always operated from a different frequency. The enemy has always known this. That is why so much of what the world does is specifically designed to suppress it. There is also a second frequency beneath gamma that acts as the gateway. Researchers call it theta, and it operates between 4 and 8 cycles per second. Theta is the frequency of deep intuition, rapid learning, spiritual receptivity, and creative breakthrough. It is the state children live in almost constantly, which is why children are so open, so trusting, so connected to wonder. It is also the state that monks and mystics access through years of disciplined meditation. But here is what most people are never told. You do not need 30 years of practice to get there. You need 7 minutes. And if you have been following from the very beginning of this message, you will remember that 7 minutes came up before. That was not an accident. Nothing in what you are hearing right now is accidental. A neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers, trained through one of the most rigorous academic environments in the world, and connected to research frameworks that have included partnerships with NASA, spent more than 30 years studying the relationship between brain frequency and human potential. What he found was not what he expected. He discovered that the brain is not fixed. It is not locked into whatever state the world has pushed it into. It is responsive. It is intelligent. It is always listening for a signal strong enough to match. And when you give it the right audio frequency, delivered in the precise sequence and at the precise timing that his research identified, the brain begins to shift. Theta opens the door. Gamma walks through it. And the person sitting in the chair with the headphones on begins to access a version of themselves that has always existed, but has been buried under years of noise, stress, fear, and the slow suffocation of a world that never wanted them. Fully awake. The tool he created from that research is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track built on a technology called brainwave entrainment. This is not mysticism dressed up in scientific language. This is documented, peer-reviewed neuroscience. The brain has a natural capacity called the frequency following response, which means that when the ears receive certain precisely calibrated sound frequencies, the brain begins to synchronize with them. The Genius Wave uses this mechanism with an accuracy that took Dr. Rivers 30 years to perfect. Binaural beats and isochronic tones are layered in a specific sequence that guides your brain from its default stress state into theta, and then opens the gateway to gamma. All of it happens in 7 minutes, and you do not have to concentrate. You do not have to meditate. You do not have to have any experience with any of this at all. You simply listen. I want to tell you about a woman named Sarah. She was working 2 jobs, raising 2 children alone, and had not slept more than 4 hours at a stretch in almost a year. She described herself to me as someone whose brain felt like a browser with 47 tabs open and no way to close any of them. She started using the Genius Wave every morning before her children woke up. 7 minutes. That was all she had to give. Within 11 days, she told me she was solving problems at work that had been sitting unsolved for months. Within 3 weeks, an opportunity came to her that she described as something she would have been too foggy to even recognize before. She did not call it coincidence. She called it clarity. She called it the first time in years that she felt like herself again. There is also a man named David who had spent 12 years in a career that slowly drained everything creative out of him. He was not depressed exactly. He was just dim. He said the light in him had turned down so low, he had almost stopped noticing. He used the Genius Wave for 30 days and then sent a message describing what he called the return of something he thought was permanently gone. He launched a side business in the following month. It was not magic. It was his own mind finally, running at the frequency it was always designed to reach. I know what some of you are thinking right now. You are thinking that you have tried things before. You have invested in tools and programs and promises that did not deliver, And $39 is not nothing when money is already tight and trust is already worn thin. I hear that. I want you to know that I am not asking you to believe me. I am asking you to give your own brain the chance to show you what it can do when it is no longer being suppressed. $39. That is the price today, not the regular price of $49. Today, through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access the Genius Wave for $39. That is a complete 7-minute audio track built on 30 years of neuroscience research, ready to download and use tonight. And it comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee. Not 30 days, not 60 days, 90 full days. That is 3 months to use it every single day and decide for yourself whether your mind is shifting. If you reach the end of those 90 days and feel nothing has changed, you get every dollar back. No argument, no interrogation, no complicated process. The investment is completely protected. But I need to warn you about something important before you go searching for this on your own. Because this product has reached enough people that imitation versions have appeared online. Counterfeit audio files that copy the name, but contain none of the precise frequency calibration that makes the real version work. Some of them contain frequencies that are not just ineffective, but actively disruptive to the brain's natural rhythm. Do not buy from any source you find through a random search. Do not trust a version you find on an unverified platform. The only legitimate source is the link in the pinned comment beneath this video. That is, the only place where you are guaranteed to receive the original, verified file directly connected to Dr. Rivers' research. Protect your mind. Go only through the pinned link. I don't need to be honest with you about something else. The price of $39 is not permanent. The access we have negotiated at this rate is limited, and once the current allocation is filled, the price returns to $49. This is not a pressure tactic. It is simply the structure of the arrangement. If you come back tomorrow and the price has changed, I want you to know I told you today. The pinned comment below this video holds your access. Click it, read it. Take the step tonight while the door is open at this price. Because what is waiting on the other side of that 7-minute audio is not just better focus or sharper memory, though both of those are real and documented. What is waiting is the version of you that heaven designed before the world had the chance to dim you down. The chosen one does not just need spiritual alignment. The chosen one needs every part of their being, spirit, soul, and mind, operating at the frequency they were created to carry. The link is in the pinned comment. The door is open, and your brain has been waiting for this signal far longer than you know. Now, let us look at the practical signs that tell you when you have reached the place Elijah reached under that broom tree, because I believe many of you listening today are standing in that exact place right now, even if you have not had the words to describe it until this moment. The first sign is a strange emptiness that follows what should have been a joyful moment. Perhaps you recently received the answer to a prayer you had been praying for years. A door finally opened. A relationship was finally restored. A financial breakthrough finally arrived after a season of scraping by. And instead of the deep, sustained joy you expected, you found yourself feeling flat, tired, even a little sad, wondering what is wrong with you that you cannot simply enjoy this victory. Chosen one, that is not ingratitude. That is the natural exhale after holding your breath for a very long time. Elijah felt it after Carmel. You are allowed to feel it after your own mountain. The second sign is what I would call functioning exhaustion. This is when you continue to show up every day, continue to meet your responsibilities, continue to care for the people who depend on you, and from the outside, everything looks completely normal. But on the inside, you are running on fumes. You wake up tired. You go through your tasks on autopilot. You have stopped feeling things as deeply as you used to. Not because you have grown cold, but because feeling things fully takes energy. You no longer have to spare. If this describes you, please hear me. This is not a character flaw. This is your body and soul quietly asking for the same thing Elijah's body needed: rest and nourishment before another single step forward. The third sign is isolation dressed up as independence. You have convinced yourself that no one else can carry what you carry the way you carry it. So you stop asking for help. Stop letting people in. Stop admitting when you are struggling. Elijah ran into the wilderness alone. He told God there was no one left, that he alone remained faithful, even though God gently corrected him later, revealing there were 7,000 others who had not bowed the knee to Baal. Sometimes exhaustion lies to us and tells us we are more alone than we actually are, convincing us to withdraw at the very moment we need connection the most. The fourth sign is a quiet, creeping hopelessness. Not always dramatic, not always loud, but a low hum underneath everything that whispers, "What is even the point of continuing this way?" If you have found yourself there, even for a passing moment, please know that this does not disqualify you from God's love or God's purpose for your life. Elijah asked God to take his life. He said it plainly, and God did not abandon him for saying it. God fed him instead. If a prophet who called down fire from heaven could speak those honest, dark words to God and still be met with bread and gentleness, then so can you, and so will you be met the same way. Now let us talk about the practical application, the way you begin to move from this place of collapse back into a place of restored strength. Because heaven is not only diagnosing your exhaustion today, heaven is also handing you a path forward. The first practical step is to stop treating rest as a luxury you have to earn and start treating it as a command you are required to obey. God did not suggest sleep to Elijah. He provided it before anything else. If you are the chosen one who has been carrying a household on your shoulders alone, believing that if you rest for even one day, everything will fall apart, I want to gently challenge that belief today. The truth is, the household, the ministry, the responsibility you carry was never designed to run entirely on your strength in the first place. Something is not more honoring to God because you exhausted yourself to sustain it. Rest is not a break from your calling. Rest is part of your calling. The second practical step is learning to receive help without guilt. If someone offers to carry a portion of your load, whether that is a friend offering to watch your children for an afternoon, a coworker offering to take a task off your plate, or a family member offering financial support during a hard season, receiving that help is not failure, it is wisdom. Even Elijah, the mighty prophet, was fed by an angel. He did not refuse the meal out of pride, insisting he could manage on his own. Strength. He ate, and he ate again, and he grew strong enough for the journey ahead because he allowed himself to be helped. The third practical step is learning to name your exhaustion honestly instead of hiding it behind spiritual language. Instead of saying, "I am fine," when someone asks how you are doing, try saying, "I am carrying a lot right now and I am tired." This kind of honesty invites the support that silence never will. If you are the person others have always leaned on, it may feel strange to become the one who needs leaning on for a season, but there is no shame in it. Even the strongest oak in the forest bends in the wind because rigidity is not strength, flexibility is. To all of you facing specific circumstances today, whether you are the one who has been carrying your entire family's needs on your own income, the one who just walked through a long-awaited healing or breakthrough, only to feel strangely hollow afterward, or the one quietly wondering if you have the strength to keep going another day. I want you to hear this clearly. These signs are not evidence that you have failed. They are simply the natural evidence that you have been carrying something too heavy for far too long without setting it down. And heaven has seen every single day of it. Every quiet tear you have hidden in a bathroom with the water running so no one would hear you. Every prayer you have prayed through clenched teeth because you were too tired to lift your hands. Every morning you have gotten out of bed, even though everything in you wanted to stay under the covers. Heaven has seen it, and heaven has spoken. You have done enough. Now let him take over. If what I have named today has found you in a place that is real, if you recognized yourself in any of the 4 signs or in the specific pains I described, I want to invite you to pause here with the chosen ones around you for just a moment. Right now, in this same moment. Others all over the world are hearing these words and feeling the same recognition you are feeling. You are not the only one who has carried this, and you are not alone in having arrived here. If this message has been a witness to something you have needed witnessed, you can press like so. It reaches the next person who needs to be named today. You can leave a single word in the comments as a way of marking that you showed up for yourself, that you were here, that you were willing to be seen. You can share this with someone who has been unable to find stillness in a noisy season and needs someone to name what they have been carrying. And if you want to remain part of this community of chosen ones who are waking up together, staying subscribed means the next message finds you. If you feel moved to pass this light forward to someone who cannot access it on their own, there is a way to do that in the pinned comment, with no expectation and no pressure. Type the word I receive in the comments. If what I named today found you somewhere true, does not need an explanation. Those 2 words are enough. They are a signal to every chosen one who arrives here after you that the recognition is real and that it belongs to them too. I want to tell you a story now about a woman I will call Miriam, though her name has been changed, whose life mirrored this exact journey from collapse to restoration. In a way I believe will speak directly into whatever you are walking through today. Miriam spent almost 8 years as the sole caregiver for her aging mother, who suffered from a slow and difficult illness that gradually took away her memory, her mobility, and eventually her ability to recognize her own daughter's face. During those 8 years, Miriam worked a full-time job during the day and came home each evening to feed, bathe, and care for her mother through the night, sleeping in short, broken stretches, rarely more than 4 hours at a time. She loved her mother fiercely, and she never once complained to anyone about the weight of what she was carrying, because she believed that if she was truly faithful, truly strong in her faith, she would not struggle the way she privately did. For years, Miriam prayed for her mother's healing, or at the very least for some measure of peace in the process. And then one winter, her mother passed away quietly in her sleep. Miriam had prepared for this moment for years, had even prayed for God to finally bring relief to her mother's suffering. And when the moment came, she expected to feel a strange mixture of grief and relief, and to gradually move forward into a new season. Instead, in the weeks that followed the funeral, Miriam found herself completely unable to function. She could not sleep, even though for the first time in 8 years, no one needed her in the middle of the night. She sat for hours in silence, staring at nothing, feeling as though the very foundation she had built her identity upon for nearly a decade had been pulled out from beneath her feet. Miriam later described this season to her pastor as feeling like a soldier who comes home from war only to discover that the silence of peacetime is somehow louder and more disorienting than the battlefield ever was. She had spent 8 years being needed every single hour of every single day, and now, in the quiet after her mother's death, she did not know who she was without the fight. She began to feel guilty for even feeling exhausted, telling herself that she should be grateful for the years she had with her mother, rather than allowing herself to grieve the enormous cost those years had taken from her own body and spirit. It was during this season that a friend from her church invited her to a quiet weekend retreat, not filled with loud worship or long sermons, but a space for rest, silence, and gentle prayer. Miriam almost did not go, telling herself she had too much to catch up on at home, too many years of neglected responsibilities to attend to now that she finally had time. But something in her, some small remaining ember of faith, told her to go anyway. On the second morning of that retreat, during a quiet time of prayer, Miriam found herself weeping in a way she had not allowed herself to weep in 8 years. Not simply grief over her mother, but grief over herself, over every night she had gone without sleep, every dream she had quietly set aside, every part of her own life she had put on hold to care for someone else. And in that weeping, she heard, not audibly but deep in her spirit, a gentleness she had almost forgotten God's voice could carry. It was not a rebuke for her exhaustion. It was an invitation. Rest now, beloved daughter. You have carried more than most ever will. Let me carry you for a while. Miriam described that moment as the first time in nearly a decade that she felt permission, real permission, to simply be tired without shame attached to it. She spent the rest of that retreat sleeping more than she had slept in years, eating slowly and without rushing, sitting quietly by a small lake on the property without feeling the need to be productive with the time. Slowly, over the following months, Miriam began to rebuild a life that included rest as a regular rhythm rather than an occasional luxury she felt guilty about taking. She began attending a small grief support group, allowing others to help carry the emotional weight she had carried alone for so long. She eventually returned to painting, a hobby she had loved in her 20s and had completely abandoned during her years of caregiving, and found that creativity itself became a form of worship and healing for her. Miriam's story matters for you today, chosen one, because so many of us assume that exhaustion only comes from failure or hardship, when in truth, some of the deepest exhaustion comes precisely from faithfulness, from years of doing exactly what love and duty required, at a cost we were too devoted to properly count while we were in the middle of paying it. If you have recently walked through the end of a long, hard season, whether that ending came through victory or through loss, and you find yourself unexpectedly depleted rather than relieved, Miriam's story is a mirror for your own. The exhaustion you feel is not evidence that your faith has failed. It is evidence of how much you gave, faithfully, for far longer than most people ever would have. And just as God met Miriam in that quiet weekend of rest, just as God met Elijah under that broom tree with bread and water before another word was spoken, God is meeting you today in this very message with the same gentle invitation. Rest now, beloved child. You have carried more than most ever will. Let me carry you for a while. If you are the one who has spent years as a caregiver, a provider, a protector for someone else, and you are only now beginning to feel the true weight of what that cost you, I want you to receive this permission today, as though it were spoken directly to you, because it is. If you are the one who just walked through a long-awaited victory and instead of joy you feel strangely hollow and unsure what to do with yourself, now that the fight is over, receive this permission as well. And if you are the one quietly wondering whether you have anything left to give, whether to your family, your work, or even your own faith, receive this most of all. You have done enough. Now let him take over. Let us go deeper now into the spiritual meaning behind everything we have walked through so far. Because there is a truth hidden inside Elijah's story that speaks directly to the exact place you are standing in today. When God finally spoke to Elijah in that cave on Mount Horeb, after the rest, after the food, after the long journey of restoration, he asked him a simple but piercing question, recorded in 1 Kings chapter 19 verse 9. What are you doing here, Elijah? Notice, God did not ask this question while Elijah was still collapsed under the broom tree, exhausted and unable to think clearly. God waited until Elijah had been fed, rested, and strengthened before he asked him to examine his heart. This detail matters enormously because it teaches us something profound about how God deals with our exhaustion. God does not demand self-examination from a depleted soul. He restores first, and only then does he gently invite reflection. Elijah's answer to God's question reveals the deep discouragement underneath his exhaustion. He said that he had been very zealous for the Lord, that the people of Israel had forsaken the covenant, thrown down the altars, killed the prophets with the sword, and that he alone was left, and now they sought to take his life as well. Notice the words, he alone was left. Elijah believed, in his exhaustion, that he was completely isolated, that no one else shared his burden, that if he fell, everything would fall with him. This is one of the most common lies that exhaustion tells us. It convinces us that we are more alone in our struggle than we actually are, and that the entire weight of the outcome depends solely on our own continued strength. God's response to Elijah is breathtaking in its gentleness and its correction. He did not rebuke Elijah for feeling alone. Instead, he revealed a truth Elijah could not see from within his exhaustion. He told Elijah that he had reserved 7,000 in Israel, all those whose knees had not bowed to Baal. 7,000 faithful people, hidden from Elijah's view, carrying the same burden of faithfulness he believed rested on his shoulders alone. Elijah was never as alone as his exhaustion had convinced him he was. This is such an important spiritual truth for you today, chosen one. Whatever burden you have been carrying, whatever fight you believe rests entirely on your shoulders, I want you to hear that you are not as alone in it as your exhaustion has convinced you that you are. There are others praying for you even now who you may never meet in this life. There is a whole unseen reserve of support, both human and divine, that God has already positioned around your situation, even in places you cannot currently see. Your exhaustion has been lying to you, telling you that everything depends on your continued strength alone. It does not. It never did. But there is an even deeper spiritual meaning here, hidden inside the way God chose to reveal himself to Elijah in that cave. Scripture tells us that a great and powerful wind tore into the mountains and broke the rocks in pieces before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. After the wind, an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake, a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire, a still small voice, and it was there, in that quiet whisper, that God spoke. Think about the progression here. Wind, earthquake, fire, all dramatic, powerful, undeniable displays of raw power, the very kind of display Elijah himself had witnessed at Carmel. And yet God was not in any of them. God chose instead to speak in a whisper, a still small voice, a gentle, quiet presence that required Elijah to lean in close to hear it. This tells us something extraordinary about how God often deals with a soul that has been through exhausting battle. After the fire of Carmel, after the wind of fear that drove Elijah into the wilderness, after the earthquake of despair that shook his confidence to its foundation, God did not meet him with another dramatic display of power. God met him with quiet, with a whisper, with gentleness. This is exactly the kind of encounter heaven wants to have with you today, chosen one. You have likely already had your fire on the mountain, your dramatic answered prayer, your undeniable display of God's power in your life. What you need now is not another display of that kind. What you need is the still small voice, the quiet whisper that says, I see you, I know what this cost you, and I am not asking you to keep performing for me. I am asking you to rest in me. The spiritual meaning of this entire story is that surrender is not the opposite of faith. It is the deepest expression of it. Elijah's greatest act of faith may not have been standing on Carmel calling down fire from heaven. It may have been lying honestly before God under that broom tree, admitting he had nothing left and allowing himself to be fed, rested, and restored rather than pretending he could push through on his own strength. There is a kind of faith that looks like standing strong in public, and there is another kind of faith, often harder and more honest, that looks like admitting your limits in private and trusting God enough to meet you there. If you have been believing that your worth to God is measured by how much you can endure without breaking, I want to gently dismantle that belief today. God is not glorified by your exhaustion. He is glorified by your trust. And sometimes the deepest trust looks like finally stopping, finally admitting you are tired, finally letting the God who called you also carry you the rest of the way. Heaven has spoken over your life today, and the message is not a call to try harder. It is an invitation into quiet. Lean in close, the way Elijah leaned in to hear that still small voice, because in this very moment, God is speaking gently over your weary heart, saying, you have done enough. Now let me take over. Let us turn now to the scriptures themselves, because I want your faith to stand on something firmer than a story or a feeling. I want it to stand on the very word of God, the same word that fed Elijah before it ever spoke a single instruction to him. The first verse I want to place before you is 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 5, where the angel of the Lord touched Elijah and said to him, arise and eat. This is such a tender starting point, because before God addressed Elijah's fear, before he addressed his despair, before he even addressed the threat from Jezebel, he addressed his hunger. This tells us that God's first concern for a weary soul is not correction, it is care. If you have been waiting for God to speak a great directive over your life before you allow yourself to rest, this verse invites you to reverse that order. Let him feed you first. The instructions can come later. The second verse is 1 Kings chapter 19, verse 7, where the angel returns a second time and says to Elijah, arise and eat, because the journey is too great for you. I want you to notice something remarkable in this verse. God did not tell Elijah the journey was too great, period, as though Elijah had failed or was simply too weak. He said the journey is too great for you, acknowledging the truth that some assignments genuinely exceed human strength on their own. This is not an insult. It is an honest assessment, and it is followed immediately by provision. God does not shame you for the size of the journey ahead. He simply makes sure you are fed and strengthened for it, because he already knows what it will require. The third verse is Isaiah chapter 40, verse 29, which says that he gives power to the faint, and to those who have no might he increases strength. Notice the specific language here. This verse is not written for the strong. It is written for the faint, for those with no might left in them at all. If you feel like you have nothing left to give, this verse was written with your exact condition in mind. God's strength is not reserved for those who still have some strength of their own remaining. It is given precisely to those who have none. The fourth verse is Matthew chapter 11, verses 28 through 30, where Jesus says, "Come unto me, all ye that labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn of me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I want you to notice the invitation here is specifically to those who are laboring and heavy laden, meaning those who are already tired from carrying something. Jesus does not say, "Come to me only if you have strength left to offer." He says, "Come specifically because you are worn out." And the rest he offers is not simply the absence of work. It is a different kind of yoke altogether, one that is shared with him rather than carried alone. The fifth verse is Psalm chapter 23, verses 2 and 3. "He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul." Notice the order again here. Lying down comes before restoration. Stillness comes before renewal. The shepherd does not drive the sheep harder when they grow weary. He leads them to a place of rest, and it is in that place of rest, not in continued striving, that the soul is restored. The sixth verse is Zechariah chapter 4, verse 6. "Not by might, nor by power, but by my Spirit, saith the Lord of hosts." This verse strips away every illusion that our own effort, our own willpower, our own endurance is what ultimately accomplishes God's purposes in our lives. It reminds us plainly that the outcome we have been striving so hard to produce was never meant to be produced by our own strength in the first place. The seventh verse is Philippians chapter 4, verse 13. "I can do all things through Christ which strengtheneth me." This verse is often quoted as a call to push harder, but read closely. It is actually a confession of dependence. Paul is not saying, "I can do all things because I am strong." He is saying, "I can do all things because Christ strengthens me," meaning the strength itself comes from outside of him. This is the same lesson Elijah learned under the broom tree and in the cave at Horeb. The strength for the journey was never Elijah's own. It was supplied, meal by meal, step by step, by the God who called him. Chosen one, I want you to hold these 7 verses close, like small stones gathered from a riverbank, each one solid, each one true, each one able to steady you the next time. Exhaustion tries to convince you that you are alone, that you have failed, or that you must keep pushing forward under your own power. The bread that fed Elijah in the wilderness and the bread of God's word that feeds you today serve the exact same purpose. They restore strength for a journey that was always too great to walk alone. Think for a moment about the image of fire on the altar at Carmel, and now hold it beside these quiet verses of rest and restoration. Fire fell dramatically in front of an entire nation, and yet the deeper, quieter work of restoration happened afterward, in obscurity, under a tree, in a cave, through bread and water and a whispering voice. Both were necessary, but they were not the same kind of work. The fire proved God's power to others. The rest restored Elijah's soul in private. You may have already experienced your own fire moment. The answered prayer everyone around you celebrated. The visible breakthrough that made others say how strong your faith must be. Private restoration. The bread and water and quiet rest that must follow. That part of the journey belongs only to you and to God. And it is just as necessary, if not more so, than the fire itself. If you find yourself doubting whether these promises truly apply to someone as tired as you are right now, I want to remind you that every single one of these verses was written either about or to people who were in genuine crisis, genuine exhaustion, genuine despair. Isaiah wrote to a fainting nation. Jesus spoke directly to the heavy laden. David wrote Psalm 23 while surrounded by real enemies and real danger. These were not comfortable words spoken to comfortable people. They were lifelines thrown to people exactly like you, in the exact condition you find yourself in today. So let these words become your bread and your water in this moment. Let them strengthen you the way that simple meal in the wilderness strengthened Elijah for 40 days and 40 nights of walking. You do not need a new dramatic sign from heaven today. You already have everything you need written into these ancient words, tested across thousands of years, proven true in the lives of the faint, the fearful, and the heavy laden who came before you. Heaven has already spoken these words long ago, and today, heaven is simply reminding you that they were written with your name, quietly folded into every line. Chosen ones do not just receive what has been given to them. They carry it forward, they multiply it. They become the living evidence that the waiting was worth it for every other person, still in the middle of their own season. And every person who finds this message is part of that larger movement, a wave of chosen ones across the world waking up at the same moment to the same recognition that the ground is already shifting beneath their feet. If you are part of that wave, consider pressing like as an act of choosing to be part of something larger than your own story. Drop a word in the comments as a signal to every other chosen one, watching that they are not here alone. Share this with someone who is still in the thick of their waiting season and needs to know that the ground is already moving. And if you are ready to remain at this table, to stay connected to this community of people who are waking up together, subscribing is simply the act of choosing to stay. If you feel moved to sow into the ground that grows something for the next person in line, the link to do that is in the pinned comment below. Type the word "I am ready" in the comments if what I just described is the season you are standing in right now. Because what comes next is the moment where you receive the name of who you have become through everything you have just survived. Now I want to bring you to the emotional center of everything we have walked through together. Because there is a truth I need you to receive, not only in your mind, but deep in the quiet places of your heart, where exhaustion has been trying to convince you otherwise. God has never once abandoned you. Not during the years you carried a weight no one else could see. Not during the nights you lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how you would manage another day. Not during the moments you cried out and felt only silence in return. Not even during the hardest hour, when you wondered whether you had the strength to keep believing at all. God was there, quietly, patiently, tenderly present, even when His presence did not feel like fire falling from the sky, even when it felt instead like nothing at all. I want you to picture Elijah again, lying under that broom tree in the wilderness, having just asked God to take his life. Picture the raw honesty of that moment, a man so depleted that death felt like relief compared to continuing forward. And now, picture God's response. Not distance, not disappointment, not a lecture about how he should have had more faith after witnessing fire fall from heaven just one day earlier. God sent an angel to touch him, physically, a touch that said, "I am here, and I have not left you even in this darkest hour of your journey." That same gentle touch is resting on you right now in this very moment, chosen one. Whatever wilderness you have been lying in, whatever broom tree you have collapsed beneath, whatever words of despair you have whispered when no one else was listening, God has heard every single one of them, and He has not turned away from you because of them. He has drawn closer. Think about the cave at Horeb, that quiet, hidden place where Elijah eventually found himself after his long journey of restoration. A cave is a place of shelter, but it is also a place of darkness, a place where a person can feel utterly alone, cut off from the world, hidden from everyone. And it was precisely there, in that hidden, dark, seemingly forgotten place, that God chose to speak most intimately to Elijah. Not through wind, not through earthquake, not through fire. Through a still, small voice that required Elijah to lean in close, to quiet his own breathing, to still his own racing thoughts in order to hear it. Chosen one, if you have felt hidden lately, forgotten, tucked away in some cave of your own circumstances, where no one seems to notice how tired you have become, I want you to know that this is not a place where God has lost track of you. This is often exactly the place where He speaks most intimately, most tenderly, most personally. The mountaintop of Carmel was a public place, filled with noise and spectacle. The cave at Horeb was a private place, filled with quiet and intimacy. Both were sacred. Both were necessary. And if you find yourself in the quiet cave season right now rather than the mountaintop season, that does not mean God has moved further away from you. It may mean He has drawn closer than ever, close enough to whisper rather than shout. I want to speak directly now to the ache underneath your exhaustion. The ache that whispers, you have to keep proving your worth through your productivity, your performance, your ability to hold everything together without ever breaking. That ache is a lie, chosen one, and I want to dismantle it completely in this moment. Your worth was never tied to how much you could carry. It was never tied to how long you could go without resting. It was never tied to how perfectly you could hold your household, your ministry, your family, your work together, without a single crack showing. Your worth was settled long before any of that, the moment God formed you and called you His own. Think about how tenderly He fed Elijah, not once but twice, allowing him to eat, sleep, wake, eat again, and sleep again before ever asking him to walk another step. God was not rushing Elijah back into productivity. He was not measuring Elijah's worth by how quickly he recovered. He gave him exactly what he needed, at the pace his body and soul required, without a single word of impatience recorded anywhere in the text. This is the same patience being extended toward you today. God is not rushing your healing. He is not disappointed by how long your restoration is taking. He is feeding you, meal by meal, breath by breath, exactly as much as you need, exactly when you need it. If you are the one who just came through a long-awaited victory, and instead of joy you feel strangely hollow, hear this straight from the heart of God today. That hollow feeling is not evidence that something is wrong with you. It is the natural exhale of a soul that held its breath through a long and difficult fight, and God is not disappointed in you for feeling it. He is near you in it, the same way He was near Elijah in the exhale after Carmel. If you are the one carrying your entire household on your shoulders, believing that everything will collapse the moment you set down even a portion of that weight, hear this straight from the heart of God today. He sees every late night, every quiet sacrifice, every meal you skipped so someone else could eat, every dream you postponed so someone else's needs could be met first. He has not forgotten a single one of those moments, and He is not asking you to carry this alone for one more day. And if you are the one quietly wondering whether you have anything left to give, whether to your faith, your family, or your own soul, hear this most tenderly of all. You are not disqualified from God's love because you are tired. You are not too far gone for restoration because you have reached your limit. Elijah reached his limit and asked to die, and God's response was not rejection. It was bread, water, sleep, and eventually a whisper so gentle it required stillness to hear it. That same gentle whisper is reaching for you right now, in this exact moment, saying, I have never left you. I will never leave you, and you have done enough. Now let me take over. Let this truth settle over you, like warm light breaking through the entrance of a dark cave. You are held. You are seen. You are not alone in this wilderness, and you never have been, not for a single day, not for a single hour, not for a single breath. Let us pray together now, chosen one. Wherever you are, whether sitting quietly, driving, lying in bed, or simply pausing in the middle of a busy day, I invite you to still your heart for these next few minutes and pray this prayer with me, as though we were kneeling side by side in the same quiet room. Heavenly Father, I come before you today on behalf of every weary heart listening to these words. You know exactly who they are. You know their name, their story, the exact weight they have been carrying, and the exact hour of exhaustion they find themselves in right now. I ask you, Lord, to meet them the way you met Elijah under that broom tree, gently, without rebuke, without demand, simply with bread and water and rest. Lord, for the one who has been carrying a household alone, who has believed for far too long that everything depends solely on their own strength, I ask you to lift that false weight from their shoulders today. Remind them that you are the true provider, the true protector, the true sustainer of every home and every family, and that their role was never meant to replace your role, only to walk alongside it. Lord, for the one who just came through a long-awaited victory and yet feels strangely hollow rather than joyful, I ask you to meet them in that unexpected emptiness with your presence. Remind them that this hollow feeling is not evidence of a lack of faith, but simply the natural exhale after a long and difficult fight, and that you are near them in this exhale just as much as you were near them in the battle itself. Lord, for the one who is quietly wondering whether they have anything left to give, whether to their family, their work, or their own faith, I ask you to speak to them the way you spoke to Elijah in that cave, not through fire, not through earthquake, not through wind, but through a still small voice that requires nothing from them except quiet enough to listen. Let them hear you say clearly today that they are not too tired for your love, not too depleted for your presence, and not too far gone for your restoration. Father, I asked that you would give each person listening today the same gift you gave Elijah: permission to without guilt, permission to eat without rushing, permission to sleep without fear of what will happen while their eyes are closed. Teach them that resting is not abandoning their calling, but honoring the body and soul you gave them to carry that calling in the first place. I pray also for healing over every place exhaustion has left its mark, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. Where sleep has been elusive, Lord, grant deep and restorative rest. Where appetite has been lost to stress and worry, restore a sense of nourishment and peace around even the simplest meal. Where joy has felt distant and hard to reach, rekindle it gently, the way a small ember is coaxed back into flame, not all at once, but patiently, breath by breath. I pray for every relationship strained by the exhaustion each person has carried. For spouses who have grown distant through sheer fatigue, for children who have sensed a parent's weariness, even without understanding its source, for friendships that have quietly faded simply because there was no energy left to maintain them. Lord, restore what exhaustion has worn thin. Breathe new life into connections that have grown tired alongside the people within them. For the one grieving a loss, whether the loss of a loved one, the loss of a season, or the loss of a version of themselves they no longer recognize after years of carrying so much, I ask for your comfort to settle over their heart like a warm covering on a cold night. Let them know that grief and exhaustion often walk together, and that both are welcome in your presence, without shame, without hurry, without demand for quick resolution. For the one still waiting for breakthrough, still standing in a wilderness season with no clear end in sight, I ask that you would strengthen them for the journey ahead, the same way you strengthened Elijah for 40 days and 40 nights on nothing more than 2 simple meals and your quiet presence. Let them trust that the road ahead, however long it may still be, will be walked with provision they cannot yet see, but which you have already prepared. Father, I thank you that you are not a distant God, unmoved by our exhaustion, unimpressed by our humanity. I thank you that you are the God who feeds the fainting, who restores the soul, who speaks gently in the quiet rather than always in the dramatic. I thank you that every person listening to this prayer today is fully known by you and fully able to rest in you without losing their place in your plan. Give them courage today to release what they have been gripping so tightly. Give them peace to trust that you are more than capable of carrying what they can no longer carry alone. Give them rest, real rest, the kind that reaches into the deepest, tired places of body and soul, and give them the quiet assurance that you have never once been disappointed in their humanity, only ever moved by it, the way a loving father is moved by the sight of a child trying so hard to be strong. We release every burden into your hands right now, Lord, every fear, every ounce of exhaustion, every quiet despair that has been whispered only to you in the dark hours of the night. We trust you to carry what we cannot. We trust you to finish what we could not finish alone. We thank you in advance for the restoration that is already beginning, even in this very moment, even before we fully feel it. In the name of the one who calls the weary to himself and gives rest to their souls, we pray. Amen. Stay in this quiet moment a little longer, chosen one, before we move forward. Let the stillness of this prayer settle over you the way the stillness of that cave settled over Elijah before God ever spoke a word. You are not required to feel instantly renewed. You are simply invited to rest here in this quiet place for as long as you need. From this place of quiet prayer, I want to walk with you now into the deeper journey of healing and awakening. Because heaven is not only asking you to rest for a moment, heaven is inviting you into an entirely renewed way of walking forward. After Elijah rested under the broom tree, after he ate and slept and ate again, Scripture tells us he walked 40 days and 40 nights to reach the mountain of God. I want you to notice that this journey did not begin with a burst of renewed energy or a return to his former strength all at once. It began simply with enough strength for the next step, and then the next, and then the next after that. Healing rarely arrives as a single dramatic moment. It usually arrives as a long, quiet walk, one day at a time, sustained by provision that renews itself again and again along the way. If you have been waiting for a single dramatic breakthrough to instantly restore everything exhaustion has worn down in you, I want to gently widen your expectation. Today, healing may come instead as a slow, steady walk, 40 days and 40 nights in its own way, each day bringing just enough strength for that day alone. This is not a lesser kind of healing. It is simply a different kind. And it is often the kind that produces the deepest, most lasting transformation. Because it teaches your soul to depend on daily provision rather than one distant miracle. Part of this healing journey involves gently releasing the identity you built around your exhaustion. For so long, perhaps you have measured your value by how much you could endure, how many people you could hold together, how long you could go without breaking. Awakening now means allowing a new identity to take root, one built not on your endurance, but on God's sufficiency. You are not valuable because of what you can carry. You were valuable before you ever carried anything at all, simply because you belong to Him. This spiritual awakening also involves learning a new rhythm of surrender, a daily unclenching rather than a single dramatic release. Just as Elijah had to eat again and again along his journey, you will likely need to surrender again and again as new burdens arise or old fears resurface. This is not evidence that your first surrender failed. It is simply the nature of walking a long road. Every morning becomes a new opportunity to open your hands again, to release the day's weight into God's care, before the weight has a chance to settle back into your grip. Consider also the image of winter turning slowly into spring, a picture that fits beautifully alongside Elijah's journey of restoration. Winter does not become spring in a single day. The change happens gradually, almost imperceptibly at first. A slightly longer stretch of daylight, a slightly gentler wind, until one day you look around and realize the frozen ground has softened. Small shoots have pushed up through the soil, and life is stirring again where everything once seemed dormant and lifeless. This is what healing after deep exhaustion often looks like. Small, quiet signs of life returning, easy to miss if you are searching only for one great, sudden transformation. If you are the one who has been carrying your household or your ministry entirely alone, this season of awakening may look like slowly learning to delegate, to ask for help, to trust others with portions of the load you once believed only you could carry. It may feel uncomfortable at first, the way new spring growth feels fragile after the protection of winter. But this discomfort is not danger. It is simply the vulnerability of new growth finding its strength. If you are the one who came through a great victory only to feel unexpectedly hollow afterward, this awakening may look like allowing yourself to properly grieve the cost of the battle, even while celebrating its outcome. Joy and exhaustion can coexist. Gratitude and depletion are not contradictions. Give yourself permission to hold both at once without feeling as though one disqualifies the other. If you are the one who has been quietly wondering whether you have anything left to give, this awakening may look like discovering, slowly, that your capacity to give was never meant to come from your own limited reserve in the first place. As you learn to draw instead from God's unlimited provision, you may find that you have more to offer, not because you have found new strength within yourself, but because you have finally stopped trying to give from an empty well and started drawing instead from a source that never runs dry. This is the road to Horeb that you are walking right now, chosen one. The long road between collapse and calling, between exhaustion and renewed purpose. It is not a road you walk in a single leap. It is a road walked one day, one meal, one breath, one small surrender at a time. And the beautiful truth is that you do not have to walk it perfectly. Elijah did not walk it perfectly either. He grumbled, he doubted, he questioned whether he was truly alone. And still, God provided every single step of the way, correcting him gently, feeding him faithfully, and eventually giving him a renewed assignment and a renewed sense of purpose once his strength had been restored. Your renewed assignment is waiting for you as well. Chosen one, just beyond this season of rest. But you do not need to rush toward it today. Today is simply for eating the bread that has been set before you, drinking deeply from the water that has been provided, and resting as long as your soul requires. The journey ahead, however great it may be, will not require you to walk it in your own strength. It never did. It never will. Heaven has already spoken. You have done enough. Now let him take over, and let the slow, quiet work of spring begin again in you. Now let me speak to the practical dimension of what comes next. Because chosen ones are not called to live exclusively in the spiritual heights of their identity while neglecting the daily, embodied, neurological reality of what it takes to sustain that level of presence and performance over time. The insights, the composure, the depth of spiritual perception that allowed you to handle what you just handled, these things need to be actively maintained. The frequency of your mind, the brainwave state that makes you available to the kind of clarity and discernment and creative intelligence that your calling requires. It needs consistent support. This is why what Dr. James Rivers spent more than 30 years developing matters so deeply for the practical life of a chosen one. The Genius Wave, 7 minutes of precisely engineered audio frequency work each day, is not a luxury for the people who have everything else figured out. It is a tool for the chosen ones who understand that taking care of the instrument through which their calling operates is itself an act of faithfulness to that calling. If you have not yet taken the step of accessing it, the link is in the pinned comment below this video right now. Available for $39 with a full 90-day money-back guarantee. One step, one decision, 7 minutes a day toward operating at the frequency you were designed for. And now, as we come to the true close of this message, I want to say something to you that I need you to receive without deflecting and without rushing past it in the way that chosen ones sometimes do when something good is being spoken directly over them. You handled something disgusting with a grace that impressed people who are not easily impressed. You stood in the middle of an attack that was calibrated to your specific vulnerabilities, and you did not fall. You did not become what was done to you. You did not let the ugliness of someone else's darkness reach into the sacred interior of who you are and corrupt what God placed there. You held the line. You kept the crown on. You proved, in front of witnesses, in real time, under genuine pressure, that everything that has been said about you in the spirit is true in the natural. You are the real thing. You always were. And now the world has seen it. If this message has spoken to something real in your life today, if these words have landed in a place that needed them, I want to ask you gently to take 3 simple actions before you leave this space. Give this video a like, because your agreement with this word is what tells the platform to carry it further, to place it in front of the next chosen one who is sitting in the middle of their own fire and needs to hear that they are not alone and they are not failing. Share this video with at least one person in your life who is walking through something hard right now. Someone who needs to be reminded that what they are surviving is not punishment but positioning, that they are not being broken but being built, that the crown they are carrying was never taken from them, even when it felt impossibly heavy. And if you have not yet subscribed to this channel, do that now and turn on notifications so that every time a new word is released through this space, you receive it without delay. Because the messages that find you at exactly the right moment only find you if the channel knows to reach you. If you feel led to sow into this ministry, to partner with the work of reaching chosen ones who are still waiting for a word that finally tells them the truth about who they are and what they carry, the link to do that is in the description below and in the pinned comment. Every seed planted here goes toward that person, the one who is one word away from understanding their calling, one message away from choosing to stay when everything in them wants to quit. As we come to the close of this message, Chosen One, I want to gather everything we have walked through together and place it gently into your hands, not as another burden to carry, but as a final word of release. We began this journey by acknowledging that you did not arrive here by accident, that heaven arranged this exact message for this exact hour of your life. We walked through the story of Elijah, a man who called down fire from heaven in front of an entire nation, and who collapsed in exhaustion and despair within a single day afterward, not because his faith had failed, but because he was simply deeply human, and the journey had genuinely become too great for him to walk alone. We saw how God met him first with bread, water, and sleep, tending to his body before ever addressing his soul, and how God later spoke to him not through wind or earthquake or fire, but through a still small voice that required quiet and closeness to hear. We looked honestly at the signs of exhaustion that so many of you carry, the strange hollowness after victory, the functioning exhaustion hidden behind a normal-looking life, the isolation dressed up as independence, the quiet hopelessness whispered only in the dark. We heard Miriam's story, a woman who gave nearly a decade of her life to caring for her mother, and who discovered, in the unexpected quiet after her mother's passing, that rest was not a betrayal of her love, but the natural and necessary response to a love that had cost her everything she had to give. We explored the deeper spiritual meaning behind Elijah's collapse and restoration. The truth that you are never as alone as your exhaustion convinces you that you are, and that surrender is not the opposite of faith, but one of its deepest and most honest expressions. We anchored our hearts in Scripture, in the words of Isaiah, of Jesus, of the Psalms, of Zechariah, of Paul, each one confirming the same truth from a different angle, that strength is given to the faint, rest is offered to the heavy laden, and restoration comes not by our own might, but by a spirit far greater than our own. We stood together in the emotional center of this message, reminding your heart that God has never once abandoned you, not in the wilderness, not in the cave, not in any hidden or forgotten season of your life. We prayed together, releasing every burden into hands far more capable than our own. And we walked slowly through the long road of healing and awakening, the 40 days and 40 nights it sometimes takes to move from collapse back into calling. One small step, one small meal, one small surrender at a time. Now, as we come to the end of this message, I want to leave you with this final truth, spoken as clearly and as tenderly as I know how. You have done enough. You have carried more than most will ever understand, and you have carried it faithfully. Even when no one was watching, even when it cost you more than you have ever fully admitted. Even to yourself, there is no shame in your exhaustion. There is no failure in your need for rest. There is only a God who has been waiting patiently. The way He waited beside Elijah, under that broom tree to feed you, ready to let you sleep, ready to walk beside you the rest of the way once your strength has been renewed. If this message reached the exact tired place in your heart that needed to hear it today, I want to ask you for something simple in return. Consider leaving a comment below and sharing which part of this journey spoke most directly to you. Whether it was Elijah's collapse under the broom tree, Miriam's quiet weekend of restoration, or the still small voice waiting for you in your own hidden cave. Your words might become the exact encouragement another tired soul needs to find in the comments beneath this message. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, I invite you to do so now, so that you never miss a message when your heart needs it most. And if you know someone today who has been carrying far too much for far too long, someone who needs to hear that they have done enough, I ask you to share this message with them, not as a task to complete, but as a gift to offer someone you love. Before we part, let me leave this final blessing over your life. May the God who fed Elijah in the wilderness feed you today, in every place you have been running on empty. May the God who spoke in a still small voice draw close enough to your weary heart that you can hear Him clearly, even in the quietest cave season of your life. May you find the courage to open your hands and release what you have been gripping so tightly, trusting that the one who called you is more than able to carry what part you cannot. May your rest be deep, your healing be steady, and your strength be renewed, not all at once, but day by day, meal by meal, breath by breath, exactly as much as you need for the road ahead. You are deeply loved, chosen one. You always have been long before this exhaustion, and you will be long after this season has passed. Heaven has spoken clearly over your life today. You have done enough. Now let him take over. Go in peace, go in rest, and go knowing that you are carried,